Ann Boynton, James Benedetti,
Here.
Dana Dornsife, Dana Goldman, Ted Goldstein,
Here.
David Higgins,
Here.
Harlan Levine, Pat Levitt, Adriana Padilla,
Here.
Amar Kadan,
Present.
Al Roulette,
Present.
Maheswari Senthil, David Serrano Sewell, Adrian Shapiro,
Here.
Jonathan Thomas,
Here.
Art Torres.
Here, present.
Okay.
All right, we'll leave the roll open until we have new members, and then we'll declare that we have a quorum. So I'd like to proceed with the updates on the medical affairs policy. And Seth, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, certainly. I'll let me share the slides and give me a thumbs up if you can see these.
I got them.
All right, wonderful. Well, happy Tuesday, everybody, and thank you. I know everybody's incredibly busy. I don't anticipate to use the entire time, but we'll see how this goes. Couple of updates. One, of course, we had the ICOC meeting last week. Very engaging, received a lot of comments. A couple of updates. One, of course, the concept plan was approved. There were a couple of very good asks that we are going to incorporate into the RFP. One, of course, is any applicant that responds what their experience is with the community-based organizations, CBOs. So that was clearly expressed as an interest at the ICOC. And the other one that's very important, of course, is the DEI. So what's their experience and their policy with DEI, and how does that match our culture and our philosophy here at CIRM? From the patient support side, today I'd actually like to talk about something different. And that is with respect to policy. So one, this is an area that certainly isn't my area of expertise, but there's been a lot of discussion on all the policy that's taking place right now, not only up in Capitol at the Hill, but also at the state level. And so I was hoping for this presentation really to be one of many. And that meaning that this would be sort of an update of what we're sort of listening to, what's out there with respect to legislation that may impact access and affordability, particularly on the cell and gene side. We're now attending right now the meeting at the Mesa, and this morning's presentation kickoff really was about access and affordability, right? With all these new therapies that are just now hitting the marketplace. So first, let's start off with a little bit of a background. I do have an ask from the team, so there's no voting that's going to take place today. But I do want to ask the team to provide us, myself, Jeff, medical affairs team, guidance on areas that we should be focusing on with respect to research, and perhaps down the road, as we become a little more robust on this side, is perhaps a policy, right? For CIRM in terms of activities that we want to support and things that perhaps we don't want to support from a patient perspective. So really not a whole lot of an ask this presentation, but more engaging than anything, hopefully. So all of you probably already know this, and this has already changed this morning, but there are 24 approved cellular gene products right now in the marketplace. And according to the presentation this morning, they being the FDA, anticipate that at 10 to 25 will be approved every year moving forward. So there's 2,200 active clinical trials right now in cell and gene therapy, several therapeutic areas, much like our portfolio. And if you do a sort of a literature review, if you will, there's several federal, state legislative activities that we're following here at CIRM that could impact patients, particularly the barriers, right? Access and affordability to some of these therapies. So again, the purpose of this presentation is really just to give you a flavor of what's out there, what we're watching, and then get some feedback on where we need to go. So we continue to address, or at least provide recommendations, some solutions to, lower those barriers with respect to achieving broad, equitable access to regenerative medicines. You're going to see this slide probably over and over again. And as we develop more and more programs, hopefully they're going to support each one of these concepts. When you think about legislation, that could be another component, right, that impacts access and affordability. So if you think about it, not in any particular order, but for example, there's legislation right now on treatments, right? Who gets treated, where they get treated, where are they going to be infused, the post-marketing component. That's an area that we're looking into right now. Another area is, and I think this is sort of a sleeper, if you will, is the distribution. And having obviously worked on the industry side, I think a lot of people underappreciate what a lift it is to actually distribute drugs to patients, right? Not only just in the United States, but outside the United States. But there's legislation right now about who can, will have the blessing, if you will, to be able to distribute some of these commercially approved products, not only in California, but also outside of California, right? What are those distribution pathways going to look like? You would think that after, and there's probably some truth to this, but after the pandemic, the distribution channels actually became a little bit more robust. But the reality is there are some, organizations that truly want to own the distribution routes. So that's something that obviously may impact access and affordability. So we're keeping an eye on that area of legislation. And of course, the big, elephant in the room is the pricing and reimbursement, right? Everybody's talking about this, whether it's, those value-based contracts, which I gave a presentation on a couple of weeks ago. What does that look like from a methodological standpoint for payers, not only for private, but also for public payers? And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then finally, not my area of expertise, this is probably more on Shyam's side, but manufacturing. There's a lot of legislation right now on the manufacturing side for cell and gene. And of course, this is really to incentivize post-pandemic, right? A lot of the creation of some of the raw materials in the United States as opposed to outside the United States. So lots of areas that are quite active. So here's just a snapshot of the selected policy examples. And Jeff and I just took a couple of these just to bring the team up to speed. One, of course, the California Cancer Care Equity Act that was signed, right, in law, expands patients' access to specialized cancer cares, particularly NCI institutions for Medi-Cal patients. So that's a big win. We're all familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act that was signed into law just recently, of course, by President Biden. And what's interesting about this, there's a lot to uncover here, but it does allow Medicare to negotiate what's called a best price and performance-based contracts. Now, these are somewhat limited, not what you would see on the private side, and still won't take effect until 2023 or 2024. So CMS is putting together a powerhouse of a team to start thinking through what their policy is going to be with respect to value-based contracts. Another thing that's interesting is the help ensure lower patient copays. So this is HR 5801. This is legislation that's attempting to address the difference in Medicare's payment amounts between inpatient and outpatient sites. Others include infectious disease therapies, research and innovation. There's the More Cures Act, which again incentivizes companies by tax credits by manufacturing here in the United States. CMS also has some engagement right now. They have some policy that's attempting to be approved. This is regarding to inpatient payment and updated NTAP reimbursement for gene-edited technologies. HR 6000 is the pandemic preparedness and genetic testing, another one that has quite a bit of information. And then, of course, there's the American-Made Medicine Act, HR 7410, which provides, again, more tax incentives for companies to manufacture here on home soil. So this is just a snapshot. Many of you are probably more familiar with this space than we are. There's others out there. What we're attempting to do is really just cast a wide net, right? And start to categorize these in a way that we can continue to present to the AAWG and bring everybody up to speed and find areas that we think might impact patients on the access and affordability standpoint. Let me pause there to see if there's any questions. All right. So I talked about performance-based agreements. These are interesting. So areas that we could consider, certainly AAWG as well, and CIRM in general, are performance-based agreements, and these are for private as well as public payers. Now, what we're observing is that they're generally well accepted right now by some of the payers. Some payers are pushing back. Medicare, of course, at this point, doesn't have a whole lot of statutory pushback right now. So it's really industry says, here's what we're charging, and this is what it's going to cost for the patient, as opposed to private payers have a little bit more leeway in terms of what those negotiations look like. So just to give you an idea of how somewhat complicated this is, many of the clinicians here obviously probably will be infusing some of these patients with these gene therapies. Insurance companies aren't pushing back, at least what we're finding, for that first infusion, right? What they want more clarity on is actually the subsequent follow-ups. So those contract-based payments are really value-based, right? So if that patient demonstrates, durability and efficacy and safety over time, that's how the organization, the manufacturer, will get paid, right? And so there is some discussion about what that methodology looks like. Not all the payers are in agreement in terms of what those biological markers are, whether they're valid, how long the patient needs to be followed up. So all of that is still really in discussion, quite frankly. I do think what you see universally is the payers are stepping up to the plate and certainly starting that first infusion, right? The subsequent follow-up with regards to payment thereafter is still sort of up for discussion. Another thing that we might be able to impact is the actual formulary reviews. So let's say the AMCP dossier, right? So that goes out to 80 or 90 payers right out of the gate once a drug's approved. And those dossiers take time to review by PT committees, whether it's at, again, Medicare, state level, or even private. The gene therapy seems to be taking a little bit more time. I don't know if that's simply because it's a new state of science for the PT committees. They're a little more cautious, or they want more information compared to a traditional sort of therapeutic. So maybe there's ways that we, CIRM, can help in terms of, I don't know, maybe from a payer standpoint or educational standpoint, reduce the time for these formulary reviews. Another concern is that many patients will require therapy across state lines. So this is fascinating. So we just talked about this at the meeting in the Mesa this morning, and this seems to be a concern to some of the organizations as well, that where the patient's going to be treated, right? They think there's going to be some states that will be disproportionately treating more patients than others, right? Certain centers of excellence. Questions about, well, will satellite institutions be able to, infuse some of these therapies? That's all open for discussion and quite frankly, sitting on the Hill right now with respect to some potential legislation. There's always concern about differential reimbursement for outpatient versus inpatient, which is impacting patient copays. One of the questions that Jeff and I were kind of throwing around was, will California require accreditation for hospitals that either limiting gene therapy administration to certain sites or perhaps opening it up, right, to more facilities, and thereby more patients will have access. And this also plays into distribution, right? I am aware of some distribution language right now that's trying to be passed in the state that would limit the distribution to a number of distributors, right, just in California. So these are all the things that bring to the AAWG's attention. I certainly don't have the answers to all these, but hopefully through this discussion, we can at least get some guidance from the team in terms of what we should be following and additional intel and research we should be engaged in. So here are a couple questions that maybe I could pose to the AAWG. One is, how can we further assist cancer patients under California's Cancer Care Equity Act? And let me pause there to see if there's any sort of response to this that might provide at least Jeff and I in medical affairs some guidance.
So question, most cancer care is delivered in an infusion setting in clinics that are typically, near but not necessarily adjacent to emergency rooms. There are complications that occur, and so someone may be, but most people in poverty get their care in emergency rooms. And so one question I have is, how do we manage patients whose primary source of care is not a regular doctor, but is in an emergent situation? And I'm thinking of this both in terms of equity under the CCC, but also for non-cancer diseases, such as oh boy, it's age is catching up to me. Sickle cell disease, and who most impoverished patients receive their care in the emergency room care setting. And so one question is can we facilitate care in the ER?
Huh.
Okay, good. That's helpful. Any other comments? Marianne, I don't see any. Okay, good. Well, another question Jeff and I brought up was, how does CMS regulations authorizing access and reimbursement for clinical trials provide access to cell and gene therapies? Any colleagues have any response to that question? Okay, well, we'll come back to that one. Another one was, how can the Alpha Clinics network streamline access and assist patients with the reimbursement in this evolving policy landscape?
I think the response to that also is going to determine just, and I know I've tried to put you in touch with Assemblyman Wood's office in respect to the Affordability office. It's going to be created effective, or start to be created effective January 1. I think that interaction with ours and them is going to be very crucial to looking at a lot of these answers.
Yeah, Art, in terms of Medi-Cal, is Harlan on the call? I don't think he's on the call.
No.
Yeah, we'd like to get a lot of insight from him on how, and Jeff was talking about this earlier about, we understand what's going on out there on the Hill, and there's only so much we can do. We can just follow it and provide guidance, from our experience. But in the state, our state, I'd like to see if it's possible we can get more engaged with Medicaid, if possible.
You mean
So
Medi-Cal?
Say again, Art?
You mean Medi-Cal in our state?
Yeah, correct, Medi-Cal, sorry. So that would be, I don't have those connections, but certainly would love to get an opportunity to interact with them and discuss some collaborations if possible.
Well, I think the first step is to make sure you follow up with Assemblyman Wood's office and see what they've been doing up to this point. And I can certainly hook you up with the head of Medi-Cal, who Secretary HHS gave me, Mark Alley, a few weeks ago. So we'll follow up. It's just a matter of determining just what the questions are, so we make the best use of their time and ours.
Yeah. Okay. Jeff and I will think about that. Thank you, Senator.
Okay. I'll wait to hear from you guys.
Good. So moving forward, what we
Question, I had a comment.
Yeah.
It's Adriana. Because I'm a family physician, so any medication that doesn't get reimbursed or is investigational for that matter needs to go through the person's healthcare insurance, whether that be Medi-Cal, Medicare Part D, private insurance, whatever, basically. And once that gets denied, then there's a process for authorization. And then it goes into negotiations about who pays what. I think there's got to be a lot of discussion of how insurance companies are going to take this on, because it's going to go through insurance companies to begin with. Doesn't matter. The only free fall is going to be people who have no insurance, basically. And then there's going to be a cost, and that needs to be decided how that's going to be reimbursed, whether it's going to go through the actual research project themselves, or is it going to go through a central working station that you're developing or whatnot?
Yeah, okay. That's helpful. Let us follow up on that. That might be an action item we can explore further. Thank you. Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I just wanted to add, because I know, part of the rationale behind that previous list of questions was, A, to sort of potentially solicit feedback, but B, to kind of point to the working group that these are things that we've actually kind of keyed in on and we think are important questions to continue to pursue. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there in case there was some sense that we're on the wrong track, but particularly this interaction between the Medicaid authorization that's allowing for clinical trial costs to be covered, because that actually could potentially impact out-of-state patients coming to California as well. And then some of the more recent things in California, particularly the Cancer Care Act. So there seems to be a kind of nexus there of, a strong lane for making sure we can really understand and bring people in along this sort of clinical trial pathway, and then considering the public payer reimbursement aspects of that. And that, again, if making sure that if we choose to spend our time, looking at that's the working group believes we're on the right track. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, good clarification. Thank you. Dan.
Yeah, regarding the second question about CMS, I'm not deeply familiar with some of these issues, but I do know that there was a new reimbursement method that was put in place by CMS for CAR-T treatments. And it does, there are some questions about what the implications would be for some pipeline cell and gene therapies that have high upfront costs. I'm not sure that there's anything that's happened since then. These went into effect in 2021, but I can send you an article about that if you want to delve into that.
That'd be great. Thank you. I don't see any other comments.
Al
I have
has
a
his hand raised.
I have a comment.
Hi, Al.
Hi there. If you're interested, there is a population health management group that the state has advanced in response to the implementation of CalAIM that's been in existence for a bit. And those of us who've been asked to participate on that, we're looking specifically at access and affordability for Medi-Cal patients. There's some significant leadership there, not Dr. Gully or any of those folks, but individuals who might be able to provide you with some insight around specifically how there may be areas of commonality between what you're trying to do and what CalAIM is designed to accomplish in terms of access and affordability for Medi-Cal patients. And so that might, if that resource is helpful for you, I'll provide you with some information and you can reach out to those folks.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Thank you. All right, I don't see anybody else. Well, how about this? This is something that Jeff and I thought about doing, and moving forward, we'd like to start producing a dashboard, right, of all the policy and legislation that's taken place. We'd like to be able to put that into obviously a presentation, maybe on a monthly basis, maybe every 6 weeks to the AAWG, bring everybody up to speed on where the status of many of the bills are, what their impact factor is for patients, for payers, et cetera. So we would be looking at not only legislative bills, policy briefs, professional society guidelines and reports, published literature, state and federal guidance documents. And if you can think of anything else that we could perhaps add to this dashboard, feel free to give us recommendation today, or perhaps send us an email. But I think this is.
I'll give you one right now. U.S. Supreme Court decisions.
Okay.
Because there's one coming down the road in October of this year that the court's going to hear, which is the University of North Carolina and Harvard being sued by students for admission standards, which deals directly with equity distribution and may have an impact on how we conduct our DES surveys.
Okay, taking notes. That's good. But to the team, does that seem reasonable? Every month, maybe 6 weeks, we'll be able to do a deep dive on everything that's going out there and impacting our patients, impacting access and affordability. Maybe I could just ask for a thumbs up, not necessarily if that seems reasonable to folks.
Right. We won't have anything available in legislative bills and initiatives until January 1, if then, and that'll be just for introduction of bills purposes, not any updates on where they're moving.
Okay. Good. That is all I had to update today. I think we have a couple questions, but certainly any more comments, suggestions, we're accepting everything.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Sean, for keeping me in the loop with your emails, because they're very informative, and I do some follow up as we've been able to on the federal level and clearly on the state level. Is there any public comment? Marianne, do you see any public comment?
Adrian Shapiro had her hand up.
Yeah, hi.
Okay,
I have
great.
my hand up. Hi. I don't know exactly where this fits in, but right now we've just received word that ICER is going to be conducting their review for stem cells for sickle cell. And we went through this process with them on trying to get our treatments, and everybody said, don't think about it, don't worry about it, it's not going to really affect things. When we are constantly hearing from payers where they're citing the ICER review as far as the treatments being cost effective. I don't know if we want them on our radar, but it is something that really does impact the community. And I don't know exactly where it needs to be, but you know, we're one of the first, and we'll be very transparent about our dealings with them and everything. But I think we need to somehow keep an eye on them, because it keeps coming up, and the whole concept of quals, which you'll see crawling through many state legislators, dockets where they're talking about that sort of thing. So I don't know if that fits in under our mandate. It's just something that I know that we as a disease community have to be aware of.
Thank you. Just keep us in the loop so that we're on top of it from our end as well.
Okay, we'll do.
Any other questions from members of the working group? Any public comment?
Ted has his hand up. Art.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Ted. Go ahead.
Hi there. So probably not in legislative matters, but I think it would be great to have a dashboard of leading therapies and where they are. Just to track, where they are, so that we know, in progress, in past being deployed, how many patients, if we need to I think closely watch the first dozen or so.
You're talking about therapies that are funded by CIRM.
CIRM therapies.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
All right.
that's good.
Any other comments? All right, thank you, Sean. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Marianne. And thank you, members of the working group. We'll be in touch and continue to hopefully receive your input whenever it comes to your attention and bring it to my attention. Great. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.